Couple of things on that. Number one, so NewsGuard, if you look at their board of advisors, former Homeland Security Secretary Tom Ridge under George W. Bush, former NSA and CIA Director Michael Hayden, right, is on their board of advisors. That should make you run as fast as you can away from NewsGuard. But so I've actually downloaded their app onto Microsoft Edge. I actually have a computer that has Microsoft Edge, stunningly. That might be the breaking story.
That is the breaking story.
And so I downloaded it just to see what this thing plays out like. And here's what's really scary about it, is that NewsGuard doesn't say, here are incorrect stories, right? It attaches to your browser. So if you just search a name, the Free Thought Project, or which I did, or the Anti-Media, Mint Press News, RT, every article associated that comes up in the browser has this big red shield and a warning next to it, which means, according to what they're saying, every article on those sites is dangerous or untrue or untrustworthy without ever going through and looking at the articles themselves. So essentially what you see when you now open your browser is a list of all these red badges or green badges. You go to BuzzFeed or CNN, and by the way, you go to any neocon think tank, you go to any neocon publication, they all get green badges. So there's no question that this is an entirely flawed system, and it's clearly being created for the sole purpose of pushing people toward this neocon, neoliberal perspective.
Yeah, that's legitimate news. You know, that's what essentially it's saying. It's like,
that's
okay,
saying.
This viewpoint's legitimate, trustworthy news,
yeah.
Everything else to the side. And what's interesting is, like, companies that, like, ignored them, because NewsGuard went out, you know, very early on and kind of assembled this crack team of 20
yes.
journalists and, you know, reached out to all these different outlets. And, you know, one of them was the Daily Mail.
Yes.
Widely read, more read than I think the Guardian in the UK.
Yes.
They got a red badge because they never responded.
Because they didn't respond.
So again, it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. Like, anybody at home not knowing that backstory is going to see this red badge. Oh, I can't trust that.
Right.
When really it's just, well, they never responded to the questions, so they had no basis to...
That's exactly right. And the other thing about NewsGuard is that they are lobbying right now to have this NewsGuard system mandated on every browser system. So this is their way of saying, now we can protect everyone, everywhere, all the time with this system. Look, people create these systems, and people are always biased. The problem is mandating. So if you're goofy enough to say, I'm going to trust these guys without doing any research, and you want to download the app and take the steps to do it, that's up to you. Yeah. But to mandate it now adds another level here of legality and
it's like an official
governmental
endorsement.
Endorsement of this, saying it must happen, therefore everyone must be subjected to these ratings.
You know, it's interesting, Ben, you've worked as a journalist in both mainstream corporate media as well as alternative independent media. What are your thoughts on this kind of new trust industry being built and molded around the idea of you know, what is deciding what is good and what is not good? You know, from that viewpoint, you've worked in both sides.
Sure.
Is it going to affect both sides?
So I think it affects everything, but I think that it's too late. I think for the groups that are designing this kind of thing, they have believed for a long time that they were the gatekeepers of information. So to get to information, you had to go through them. You had to go through the mainstream media. You had to go through these think tanks and influencers, but not anymore. And the problem is now you can't go back to a population that's gone around them and say, okay, you know what, guys, forget it. We're going to build some walls. You got to go through the gates again. It's too late. It's like the cow's out of the barn, and now you close the door. I think that's what's going to happen.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. You know, another element of this, which I think you're aware of, is that there are now reports that a team at Duke University is working on a product that will offer real-time fact-checking on political speeches you're watching on TV. Yes. What are the pitfalls of this? Because, you know, it's kind of like, okay, like, I mean, I've seen it back in the day where it's like, what is it, when they hooked all the opinion people up and they had the little heartbeat line of, did the people like this? And you could see that for the polling, the real-time polling. Yes. You know, what's real-time fact-checking?
So real-time fact-checking doesn't really exist unless the facts that are being stated are so egregious, so egregiously wrong, or so specifically right that you could immediately, you know, Siri, what's the answer to this, and they can find it. Right. The problem is that this system that Duke is setting up, it relies on people. People have to input the information in order to determine whether or not something's true. But the other thing that's not being discussed about this story is context. Well, God forbid we ever, that I ever give someone that authority in our lives to say, you are the determiner of what is true and what is not. Again, facts are facts, but to allow someone to tell you that the images that you are seeing are moral or immoral, the ideas of politics. So politics is more than just, winning and losing, which is what it's become today. It's about right and wrong. It's about morality. It's about ethics. It's about values. How would you allow someone else or some other entity to determine for you what is moral and what is right? And I think that's the real divider here. What apps like NewsGuard are never going to understand is that people need to be able to have this experience that is a moral, values-based experience, and you're never going to get that with a red badge or a green badge.
No, you're not.